I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the ultimate Toyota RAV4 that you can buy here in Australia. It's called the Edge. If you're watching from overseas, that'll shock you because in most markets it's called the RAV4 Adventure, which, let's face it, is a much better name. But whatever you call it, this RAV4 comes with all the bells and whistles, apart from one thing, and it's a big thing, a hybrid system. You can't get this cool looking RAV4 spec in a hybrid, and personally I think that's a mistake. Though in today's video, we'll see how the RAV4 Edge performs with just the 2.5 litre petrol engine by itself, and interestingly for the RAV4, an 8-speed torque converter automatic. This is the only specification of RAV4 that comes without a CVT, and in a lot of ways, that helps it. Personally, I'm a big fan of the look. Nardo green is what we're calling this color here on Team Chasing Cars. I think it looks pretty cool. Nice wheel design, lots of black trim. It just looks a little bit meaner than the Cruiser hybrid that I ran as a long-termer last year. And that is also a theme that extends to the interior of the RAV4 Edge, which is full of these pops of orange throughout. It looks really mega. It actually works quite well with that grey-green color outside too. And you're just given the impression that this is the RAV4 the designers really wanted to make. Whereas some of the other specifications of this car are a little bit, I suppose, bland in terms of color, this is cool. So we have orange down here next to the cup holders, next to the wireless charging pad, and here in this really handy shelf that makes it really easy to stash bits and bobs on the go. The rest of the RAV4 Edge's interior is pretty familiar if you've watched any of our other RAV4 content, or if you've bought yourself a new RAV4, and lots of Australians have done that. This is actually the most popular SUV in the country right now, and it's easy to see why. This cabin is one of the reasons. It's comfortable, it's spacious, and the design is good. We have this dashboard that stretches out laterally. We have a floating touchscreen on top. I know not everybody likes that, but the software is really easy to use. We have integrated navigation, DAB radio, and Bluetooth, and actually the JBL stereo in this car sounds pretty convincing. Now, I did live with one of these for about 4 months in the Cruiser hybrid, which had most of the same stuff inside as this car, and it's a cabin that you really, it really shows you over time why it's so well done. Just everything is where it should be, and that's relaxing. Now, the Edge actually has the best seats of the bunch. The upholstery is just softer and more plush than in the Cruiser, which sits beneath it. It's also the only RAV4 spec that gets cooled seats, and Australia is starting to get hot, and cooled seats make the difference. They're also heated. We have electric adjustment and memory for the driver. Strangely, only manual adjustment for the passenger and no height adjustment on that seat, which means if you have a tall front passenger, they're going to hit their head up here beneath this panoramic sunroof. Also a feature exclusive to the Edge, which is quite interesting. Nice little steering wheel, small diameter, feels good in the hand, and we look forward at digital gauges here, or at least partially digital. You can't put a map there, but you can put your nav data, your media, your trip computer, and it works pretty well. Plus soft touch materials here on the doors. You don't get that on the GX and the GXL. You do get it on the Cruiser and the Edge, but all the models share this nice material up here on the dash. It's just a little bit hard and scratchy where you rest your legs here. But by and large, up front the RAV4 is good and the Edge is great. Let's check out the back. Now, it's much the same affair here in the rear seat as the RAV4 Cruiser hybrid that we ran. It's just we don't have the hybrid batteries beneath the rear seats in this version that doesn't have any electric propulsion. But what you will see is that it's pretty roomy back here. It's a good back seat. I'm 6 foot. Headroom is fine beneath this panoramic sunroof. Legroom is good behind my own driving position. Tow room's fine. The floor is almost flat, so you could actually get 5 people into this car without too much of a pinch. We've got air vents, 2 more fast charging, old size USB ports in the back. Soft touch materials on the doors back here. Only one map pocket, but I mean, that's not really much of a problem. Flip down armrest with 2 cup holders. And the ISOFIX points are nice and exposed, so fitting a child seat back here will be fairly simple. So all in all, it's a nice usable space here in the back of the RAV4 Edge. We'll check out the boot. As we come around to the rear end of this car, which also looks pretty cool, you'll be able to pick one of these specs on the road from the matte black badging, which looks pretty mean. You can also only get this color in the Edge or Adventure, depending on where you live in the world. Now, Toyota insists on doing these beeping power tailgates, which is pretty annoying, especially because it's quite slow, but once it's open, it reveals a good sized boot. Now on this spec, we get a hard edged boot floor, though you can flip it upside down if you want carpeting. Not too many places to store your stuff. There is one netted area over here, but no shopping bag hooks in the back of the RAV4. Do have a cargo blind though. That's a quality piece if you want more privacy. Plus, we have a space saver spare underneath the boot floor, which is no longer a given in this class. So it is good to see here as I find the button. Once again, we've got to put up with that beeping as the door closes, but it means that you and I can jump into the driver's seat of this RAV4 Edge and see how the 2.5 litre petrol goes out on the road. So what's the Toyota RAV4 Edge like to drive with its 2.5 litre naturally aspirated petrol 4-cylinder engine? Broadly the same engine as in the RAV4 Hybrid, but without the hybrid bits. And I gotta say, it was the hybrid bits that endeared the 2.5 litre combination to us so much when I ran the RAV4 Cruiser Hybrid E4 all-wheel drive as a long-termer. So, do you still get the magic without it? Well, you definitely get some. There's a lot of parts of this engine that are good. There are some parts of it that make the RAV4 Edge the best of any RAV4 to drive, but there are things that you miss out on and you do lose out in some ways. But first, the basics. What is the engine we're dealing with here? Well, this is one of Toyota's new generation Dynamic Force 4-cylinder engines. It produces 152 kilowatts of power and 243 newton meters of torque. So that's quite a lot of power for the segment. By contrast, the quite quick indeed Volkswagen Tiguan 162 TSI makes 162 kilowatts of power, so we're almost at that level. But because we don't have any turbocharging here, and we don't have the hybrid assistance, torque is quite low at 243 newton meters, and that's really what you feel. The RAV4 Edge needs a rev in order to get anywhere quickly, particularly when you compare it to the Escape, the Tiguan, the Kodiaq, the CX-5 Turbo. It's not that fast. Of course, it doesn't need to be. This is just a Toyota RAV4, just a mid-sized family SUV, and in 2.5 litre form, it gets along just fine. In fact, it does have a bit of low-end torque to it. It can cruise up this long hill near my house without having to go crazy gearbox-wise. And there is a gearbox. This is the only RAV4 specification in Australia with an actual gearbox. It's an 8-speed torque converter automatic unit, and it's much smoother and more intuitive than the CVT Auto fitted to the other grades, including all of the hybrids and the cheaper 2-litre naturally aspirated 4-cylinder that is the bottom of the range engine for the RAV4. This goes to show why a normal auto is still a better transmission than a CVT, even though CVTs have come a long way. Getting behind the wheel of a RAV4 with a torque converter is lovely. Where you lose out though is both in torque, which I've already spoken about. The hybrid kind of feels like a small turbo in a lot of ways because you get that instant shove at the low end. The engine doesn't have to rev as hard. It's just got a helping hand there. And in the Toyotas, the petrol engine kind of keeps that small battery topped up. So you always really have a little bit of electric juice to help you out in the RAV4 Hybrid. And I found that to be quite endearing when I ran it in the long term. The other way you lose out though is unsurprisingly in terms of fuel consumption, because the 2.5 litre engine without hybrid assistance is a lot thirstier. Basically 3 to 4 litres per 100 kilometres thirstier in town and probably 1 litre per 100 kilometres thirstier on the highway. So if you do a lot of country driving, you're not really going to notice the difference, and the simplicity of this package might make sense. But if you spend any time in town, you're going to make your money back on the hybrid pretty quickly within a couple of years, because it really does deliver a good saving. In the hybrid, we were doing 5 to 6 litres per 100 Ks in town. Here in the Edge with the 2.5 litre, it's 9 to 10. Quite a stark difference. The rest of the package is just new Toyota RAV4, so really good, surprisingly good dynamically. The steering is like oddly sweet. You get behind the wheel of the RAV4 and you're just like, wow, this steering rack is really well weighted. The ratio is bang on. It's just intuitive and nicely tuned for for a car like this. Similarly, the chassis, or on the TNGA platform here, the chassis is really up to the job and it can really boogie with you on a country road. Now, actually the Edge is a little lighter than the hybrids because we go without the battery and the motors, and that makes it slightly better to drive, a little bit less mass to kind of throw around, but it's pretty similar really. You'd be splitting hairs to pick the two of them, but they both work really well. You know, they give the keen driver something to do on a country road, but most of the time when you're just plying the suburbs like I'm doing now, you know, it's really, really well suited and really nice. Refinement is also impressive. It's really quiet in the cabin. There's more noise insulation in the RAV4 than in most of its rivals. Of course, when you need to rev the engine, some of that dissipates. And safety is impressive too. So we do have lane centering. It's probably not the best tuned system. The Hyundai Tucson and the Kia Sportage have better tuning of their lane centering. We've got adaptive cruise, we've got AEB, we've got blind spot monitoring, we have a 360-degree camera. So, you know, all in all, it feels like a pretty safe and secure car. So those are my detailed impressions of the Toyota RAV4 Edge. Honestly, Toyota puts so much effort into the new RAV4 that it's pretty hard to find any serious fault with these cars in almost any specification. That being said though, it's our job on this channel to nitpick and find those faults. And for me, the RAV4 Edge's biggest problem is that you can't get it in the hybrid, which really is the standout drivetrain for the Toyota RAV4. This thing uses about 4 litres per 100 Ks more fuel in pretty much every situation, apart from maybe very high speed country driving. And I mean high speed because even the hybrid is pretty efficient on the highway. So if they made that change, I think it'd be good. Even though the 2.5 litre in this car is a little smoother to drive than the hybrid, it's probably not worth it for the extra fuel that you use. But just about everything else about this car, from the cheap ownership proposition to the quality interior, to even just the look of the thing, is really easy to like. Now let me know what you think down below this video. While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.